Today we're taking a look at the surface of shells. We're going back to macro basics and we're going to be playing with light and colour to highlight the interesting textures on the surface of these shells. I've got a few different shells to look at, so let's get started and I'll see you in just a sec. Hi guys, I'm Ben from Adaptalux and welcome to another macro photography tutorial where today we're taking a look at these shells. I've got a few different shells to look at. These really large ones left over from one of Sam's dinners. I think they're scallop shells, but I'm also going to be taking a look at the smaller types of shells that you find on the beach. So if you're a beachcomber and you go around picking up interesting looking objects from the beach, this is going to be a great tutorial for just finding some interesting ways to photograph those small objects and the textures found on this type of sea life. I'm going to go and grab the Adaptalux Studio and some coloured lighting arms so that we can get started exploring the surface of our shells. I'm setting up down here on my coffee table, but for a shoot like this, there's not a huge amount of setting up to actually do. We're just going to be exploring the items that we've got, changing a few different variables like our lighting and perhaps our lens, just to see what we can get out of our shells. I've got a few different types of shells here. I've got these really large ones and a few that my wife has found on various beaches over the years, nice little small ones. A lot of variety to explore in terms of texture, colour and size. What that means is that we don't need a huge amount of equipment, or more specifically, we don't need any particular equipment. You can use whatever you have on your camera. You can change lenses, you can change lighting to suit whatever you're trying to achieve with your particular shells. They're all going to be different. It's unlikely that you'll have the same type of shells that I have, so you might need to be a little bit further out or a little bit closer in. I would say that having a macro lens and some lighting is going to make your life a little bit easier when it comes to exploration and experimentation. But if you don't have that, try putting your subjects in different areas around your room or your house. Put it on different surfaces, different types of tables, and maybe put it near to a window to get different types of shadows. What I'm going to be doing is using my trusty coffee table. I'm going to be setting up with the Adaptalux Studio, and I've got a couple of different lenses to try. I've got my 100mm Tokina f2.8 macro lens, and I've got a reversed lens set up here to get a lot closer to some of those smaller shells. Now, I don't want to be talking for too long about all of this stuff, so I'm going to jump right in and set up a little bit of coloured lighting to get our first look at the surface of our shells. What I've done here is simply to add a single white lighting arm to the Adaptalux control pod, which is sat on my mini tripod. This is just a very simple setup to get us started and get some light down onto our subject so that we can see some of the textures and the relief on the surface of our shells. We can add a lot to this setup though and really start experimenting and exploring around our shells. One of the things that we can add is colour. Recently we've been doing a lot of quite complex and varied shoots with a lot of moving parts and a lot of different things to consider, so it's easy to forget that one of the simple pleasures of a lighting setup like this is just adding a little bit of colour, either through some colour filters or by using some coloured lighting arms. We have all of these huge variety of interesting coloured lights to play with, and it's easy to just overlook those in favour of chasing after these complex subjects and techniques. So what I'm going to do today is get right back to basics and simply start adding a little bit of colour to my shells here and see if we can't make them look a little bit more abstract, a little bit more interesting and a little bit more eye-catching. With today's theme of getting back to basics, let's talk a little bit about the difference between coloured lighting arms and colour filters. It's a question that we get asked quite a lot. What's the difference between the light produced by a coloured lighting arm and the light produced by a colour filter? Why wouldn't you just put a colour filter on a white lighting arm and be done with it? Well, there are some big differences. Not least, the colour that you're getting out of one of our coloured lighting arms is extremely vivid. It's very, very bright, and you can leave it undiffused, so you can have harsh shadows made from various different colours. It's a really interesting technique to play around with, especially if you're shooting something abstract. With our colour filters, they provide much more of a soft wash of colour. When they're attached to a white lighting arm, it's sort of spreading that light at the same time, so it's acting as a diffuser. You can't use those colour filters undiffused. Now, both of these have different advantages. It depends on the type of shot that you're wanting to go for. Green and blue are the last two colours that you see disappear as you get deeper underwater, so that's why you see a lot of underwater photography having this sort of blue tinge to it. What that means for our shells, though, is all we need to do to make it look a little bit subnautical is to add a little bit of blue and maybe a little touch of green as well. Of course, we can do that in two different ways, using the blue and the green lighting arm, but also using the blue and the green colour filter. Here's three versions of the same picture. One is using undiffused coloured light from the coloured lighting arms themselves. The second one is still those coloured lighting arms, but I've added white diffusers to them. And the third is using white lighting arms with the coloured filters. I'll leave it up to you guys to decide which style you prefer and what would work best for your shots, but there is a lot of variety to be had using all of these different components in combination with one another. Getting back to my shells, there really is a lot to enjoy when shooting these things in macro. There's a huge amount of variety in texture and colour. Every shell is completely unique, almost like a snowflake. It's been formed in a slightly different way with different patterns and colours, so getting close up can start to reveal things that you wouldn't notice using your naked eye. If you don't fancy that much of a challenge, I would recommend finding some larger shells, maybe from oysters or scallops, because getting closer to those requires less magnification. It's a lot easier to get more in focus with a wider depth of field. If you're shooting these tiny little shells, you might need something like my reverse lens setup here with extension tubes, which gets very, very close, but can be very tricky to get light into the right place and also to keep enough of your shot in focus because of that very shallow depth of field. No matter what you're using though, if you can get close enough, you can get some really interesting abstract shots using the textures and the relief on the surface of your shells. One of the more interesting aspects of these larger shells, and some of the smaller ones as well, is that the inside of the shell is almost completely smooth and almost a little bit reflective. This gives us a real challenge for our lighting, trying to place our light in a way that doesn't block off the interesting changes in colour throughout the shell. I do find it a lot easier shooting this outside texture and actually a lot more pleasing because there's a lot more relief, but if you want a little bit of a challenge and a little bit of variety, definitely try taking a look at the inside of your shell. As usual, I've had a lot of fun exploring and experimenting with my subject today. These shells have got really interesting features that are great to explore with different lights, different colours of light, different angles of light, playing around and finding ways to make these seemingly quite normal looking shells a little bit more abstract, stand out a little bit more, and just be a bit more visually interesting. If you've enjoyed getting back to the lighting basics with me, playing around with a bit of colour, make sure to subscribe. There's plenty more where this came from coming in the future. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like and leave me a comment to let me know which type of lighting you preferred, the direct coloured light or the diffused coloured light or the coloured white light, as it were, with the colour filters on the lights. That's all that I've got time for now though, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.